Hello, today is Friday, February 6th, and welcome to episode 554 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today by NSI Advisory Board member Les Munson and 2 of our favorite senior fellows, Morgan Vigna and Matt Hayden. All right, folks, it's not really a fun Friday because we're talking arms control, which I think a lot of analysts would say is a pretty heavy topic. So let's see how the team can spin this one. So we're talking about New START, which is a decades-long arms control agreement between the U.S. and Russia. It was signed in 2010 and came into force in 2011. It capped deployed strategic nuclear warheads at around 1,500, limited missiles and bombers, and also required inspections that gave both the U.S. and Russia supposedly visibility into the other's nuclear arsenal. That New START formally lapsed earlier this week, and it hasn't been replaced by a new deal. There are some talks that are occurring on the sidelines of Ukraine-related talks in Abu Dhabi, but right now there's been a report by Axios while the U.S. and Russia have reached a non-binding understanding to continue observing New START limits in good faith for now. Like I said, there's no new deal. There's no deal to replace New START. The Trump administration, in addition to looking at Russia, is also focused on China, which we've discussed here on Fault Lines, the growing, nuclear ambitions of China, and whether a new deal needs to require not only Russia but China to be included to make any sense. Of course, the New START has been in effect, but there have been multiple violations by Russia since it came into effect. So we're kind of left wondering, what's going on? Is this a big deal? Morgan, I'm going to turn first to you. New START looks to be gone legally. There might be a story that they're operationally, the principles still might be in effect, and the rolling of the eyes have already occurred to those just listening to the show. I think Morgan might not agree with the Axios article there. And like I've said, since 2010, Russia's, violated, withdrawn. There's been numerous arms control agreements that Russia hasn't taken too seriously. So where do we stand now? Where does it look? Where do you think we move into the future?
Yep. So, Jess, New START has been billed as the last major guardrail constraining nuclear arsenals in Russia and the United States here. As you mentioned, it caps the number of warheads. Russia has not been in compliance with New START. The United States, when we sign treaties, they become law of the land. Russia doesn't necessarily take the same sincerity when it comes to their signatures on treaties. So with that said, you note something very important, and that is that New START doesn't include China. China has a modest but a very fast growing nuclear arsenal. They're building 100 nuclear warheads a year, and it now has more ICBM silos than the United States has active Minutemen III silos. Russia also fields 2,000 non-strategic nuclear weapons that are not part of the New START limitations. And so when you combine both Russia and China, they have more than 2 times the nuclear capacity of the United States here. And so when it really comes down to it, New START, yes, Donald Trump was incorrect, or excuse me, he was correct. It was a bad treaty. But I'm suspect on whether or not it's a good path or a good decision to actually negotiate a new one, particularly if China's not involved. China has noted that it has absolutely zero interest in signing or being part of a new START, so to speak. And so if China's not a part of it, then I don't know what incentive we have, especially if Russia continues to fail to comply and a new treaty does not include all the nuclear weapons that are currently covered by New START, not currently covered by New START, I should say.
So, Matt, Morgan discusses what a new START may look like and who needs to be in it. I mean, she seems a little skeptical that we can get China to the negotiation table. What's your take on arms control looking forward?
So you have to think about the optics when this came to be. In 2010, there was a lot of contention around we have adversaries that are guessing what our nuclear posture is. And in order to have a balanced deterrence, it makes sense for us all both to know what each other's working with and to have integrity into our decision making. So we had a challenge where we really did know. We know what Russia had. Russia knew what we had. And there was really just a show of we're not going to really escalate the rhetoric around nuclear arms, as long as we just kind of stay calm in our production and our efforts and armory we have. Now, to be clear, if we look at the terms of this treaty, we have enough nuclear arms, they have enough nuclear arms to take the whole place down. So it wasn't like we were saying, oh, you can only have two. We're talking like thousands of nuclear warheads. So the challenge wasn't thou shalt not have capacity to rain fire. The challenge was that we were going to be open and communicating to keep the tensions between US and Russia from escalating. Now we have a Chinese adversary that is an interest in escalating, that does not want to be showing their cards, that does not want to have those types of conversations with anyone publicly. At the same time, Russia, who didn't really keep up their end of the deal of being transparent or aligning with the deal, at the same time has no interest in expanding to a treaty that covers things like hypersonics, that covers things like short range, that covers things like space-based efforts and things that could target space-based assets. Because if they have it or if they don't, they want to threaten that they do. And so it's not in their best interest to sign anything that is of relevance to kind of have that same cooling down effort that we had in 2010. So what my magic 8 ball is that the administration's looking at this and saying the value we have is getting our partners to calm down and to realize that we're trying to work an economic and national security relationship with all of them, not purely a whose army can take who type conversation. At the same time, building up our munitions and those conversations to be strong as they can be. So there's an interest in expanding to a new agreement that does have a open, transparent, these are the types of weapons that should be restricted. This is the types of commodities we have, and this is how to move forward. And no one expects that China and Russia are going to adhere to that, but it's worth fighting for on the diplomatic stage.
No, Matt, I'm going to chime in here and push back on you. Yes, we have our fault line. And that is like, to be clear, Russia was the one that suspended New START inspections in 2022. And then in 2023, suspended its participation. And then in 2024, the State Department comes out saying that, oh, by the way, Russia may have violated and exceeded the New START limit, meaning like Russia was in violation for years. And all of a sudden, they now want to come back to the table and negotiate. I mean, we're hearing that, President Trump and Putin want to do some sort of like weird handshake, and, adhere to the spirit of New START. Like, why should we believe Russia? They have given us no incentive to be able to have any faith or confidence in their word when it comes to adhering to international treaties. So I just don't understand what we would get out of this.
I think having a treaty at least establishes that baseline. I think if you're going to break it, you're going to break it. But if you don't ever have the rules of the road, that's where you have a difference of opinion from the administration's perspective. Because if they're just going to do whatever they want, but at least hold them to their word is a diplomatic effort.
We'll see.
Jones, I'm just going to jump in here and maybe level set a little bit with my national security friends. A treaty needs the support of the U.S. Senate. The last time the Senate approved a treaty was the New START treaty back in 2010. That was 16 years ago. That was the last major treaty supported by the Senate. Right now, it's unimaginable that the Senate would approve any kind of arms control treaty with either Russia or China. Frankly, we're in an arms race right now on the tech side, as on all stuff that Matt laid out and Morgan laid out, hypersonics, stuff in space. The battlefield is changing. We're trying to get ahead of our competitors here, particularly China, because in the long run, our real peer competitor is China, not Russia. And yes, it would be nice to have an arms control agreement with China, but it ain't going to happen today. This report by a pretty good reporter on Axios that there's kind of a handshake agreement and an eyeball agreement to keep observing New START between the U.S. and Russia is probably true. There's no reason for us not to keep observing that because it doesn't really limit us either in this arms race. And so I think this is not a ripe issue yet. It's kind of an interesting check-in on the politics of things. But remember that, and I'll just go back and do a little history lesson for people. I know it was only 16 years ago. But that was when Barack Obama, who was as obsessed with nuclear weapons as this president, maybe more so, had 60 votes in the U.S. Senate. He only needed, in the Democratic Party, he only needed 10 Republicans. He actually only needed 7 Republicans to come over and support it. He got 10. it was 70-30 in favor of New Start. Again, it's impossible to imagine that happening now. So the best you're going to get, if you're a pro-agreement type person, a Wilsonian, is some sort of handshake deal between heads of state. Nothing else is really going to happen.
So I'll say I've heard of a handshake deal. I haven't heard of an eyeball deal. Is that a term? Is that what people say? The people in the loop, Les? Yeah.
Well,
eyeball.
So if you're in stealth mode,
that's what you do. You don't even do handshake deals.
You might be looking for an eyeball deal.
Okay, that's good. Guys, that's our future, eyeball deals. Everyone keep your eyeballs open. That's a wrap. Thanks to Kelly Crawley, Todd Jennings, and the entire NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Monday. Let's see where other nuclear talks may get us on Monday, February 9th, for another episode of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast that gets you smart fast. We're on YouTube. Check us out there. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.